Just Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again. How are you? Welcome to episode 110 of Imagine Theatre's podcast series. And this time we're going to catch up with the New Zealand-born stand-up and pantomime comedian Jared Christmas.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode, we looked in more detail at the role of the deputy stage manager during the pantomime season. If you missed it, you can still check it out along with all of the other previous episodes, and don't forget to subscribe to the series so you don't miss any future episodes. Well, so far in the series, we've spoken to stars of the pantomime stage, various creative team members, and many, many more. We've looked at specific panto titles, explored all of the elements that make a panto work, and we've celebrated panto successes at 3 consecutive UK Pantomime Awards ceremonies. But this time, we're going to chat to the New Zealand-born stand-up and pantomime comedian who's had success on stage, on television, in film. He's a regular for Imagine Theatre at the Montfort Hall in Leicester. He is Jared Christmas. How are you, mate?
I'm good, man. That's a hell of an intro. Thank you. I love it.
Tell us a bit about you, from Christchurch originally, of course. Tell us a bit about your childhood and any influences that made you go into the business.
Not really. I grew up in a military family, so we moved around a lot. I was born in a tiny military base right at the tip of the North Island of New Zealand, a place called Kaitaia, which is on my British passport, by the way. So it's always fun, especially going to places like America, where they really look at everything on your passport. And they get to place of birth, and it's spelled K-I-A-T-A-I-A. And they have an absolute fit because they're like, I've never heard of this. This is no British place. And then you have to go through the rigmarole of explaining to them that you can get passports for, other countries. Because my dad was English. That's essentially why I'm here. We then moved to Singapore for 4 to 5 years. So that was like my really early childhood. I started school in Singapore. And then we moved back to New Zealand. And it wasn't really until I was pretty shy, Martin. Can you believe it?
No.
Yeah, really painfully shy and quite a nervous kid. And I think that was from moving around so much. I'd form these friendships and then it's snatched away from you. And I think, if I really wanted to psychoanalyze stuff, that maybe that's where comedy started playing a factor for me, because the quickest way to make mates is by getting people to laugh, right?
Yeah, you've got to be funny, though, haven't you? When did you first realise you were actually funny?
I don't know. I think I was always funny around the house. Like, my parents and my brother all said, no, you're always making us laugh. But, I think that's just a family thing, isn't it, But in terms of really knowing and realising, oh, my God, I can make people laugh here, was probably when I started doing improv comedy in school at the age of 12.
Wow.
A great thing that happened in New Zealand was, like the Whose Line Is It Anyway sort of thing. In the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, some very talented and determined improvisers in New Zealand managed to get funding from the government to put improv or theatre sports into schools as a after-school option. Then it was like sports. So there were inter-school competitions, and then you could move up in your region. Your school would move up the leaderboard. You get into semi-finals, then into the finals, and then you could get chosen to represent your region, and then play against other regions. All of this from the age of probably about 12. So it was a real early experience of performing on big stages too. Like I remember starting off doing shows in a classroom at school against another school, and there's just a handful of people in there. But then as you got through those early stages and you were playing against other teams that were good, next thing you're in the school hall and it's all your friends and family, and the other 5 people on your team, it's all their friends and family, and the other schools have brought their friends and family. And then if you get into the semi-finals, you're in a professional theatre. When I first played like a really big stage was when I was about 13, doing improv comedy, and it was amazing. I think that really cemented things for me then.
Do you know, this is such a fantastic idea, and I know in this country now there's so much pressure on the national curriculum and so on. But what a fabulous idea. You know, many of those kids may never have become performers, but look what it does for their sort of social development and, enables them to, build confidence and so on.
Oh, huge, huge, invaluable. I think majority of sort of certainly my generation and generations before me of New Zealanders, if you are any of the successful performers, all did theatre sports at school. There's a definite correlation to it. It's obviously, of course, it's still not going. I think it ended in the early 2000s, and the 90s really was the heyday of it. Yeah, it really was fantastic and absolutely cemented where I was going in life.
I love the phrase theatre sports as well. So yeah. I guess if you had a tie or a draw with another school, did you have to have a replay?
No, but you did have to do quick fire games to settle that. Mate, you would love it. Look into theatre sports. There's a Canadian guy called Keith Johnston who created theatre sports. And theatre sports is what Second City grew out of, or at least used those techniques. All your famous American, like Amy Poehler and Tina Fey, came from a place, I think, called the Groundlings, or Improv Olympic, and Upright Citizens Brigade. In the States, these are really big improv companies. And Canada, there's a place called the Loose Moose. All these famous comics have all come from improv. And it surprised me when I moved to the UK that there wasn't that scene here. You had the Comedy Store Players. It's better now, but the Comedy Store Players who, Mike Myers was part of that in the early days. They really, really were the pioneers of it in the UK. Paul Merton has been a member of it since, his entire career. He's still performing improv at the Comedy Store. So yeah, improv really was the turning point for me, turning me from a sort of shy kid into, I guess, what I am now. It's all down to my brother, really, because he introduced me to it.
There are so many sort of similarities between improv and panto, particularly when something happens in panto and you have to go with it, whether it's interaction with the audience or whatever. But, and I've asked so many people on this podcast series what their first sort of impression of panto was, and they talk about going to see shows when they were 4 or 5 years old or whatever. Of course, you never got that opportunity, did you?
No, I didn't. The first panto I ever saw was the first panto that I was ever cast in, which was 2012, New Wimbledon Theatre, Snow White with Priscilla Presley. Mm-hmm. And I'd done a bit of TV. I'd had quite a successful BBC show. It only went for one series, but it had put me on someone's radar from that. And I think they took a bit of a gamble on me. And I was put in as third billing after Priscilla Presley and Warwick Davis. So, a bit of a drop, mate, from those two. I showed up to that first day of rehearsals. Like, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, man. Obviously, I'd heard of panto. Of course, I'd heard of panto. But I didn't fully comprehend what the hell panto was. And honestly, mate, halfway through that first day was when I realised, this is overacting. I can do that. I can do this. It was great. And then the learning curve was huge, man. But what was great was Priscilla Presley had even less of an idea of what the hell panto was. So next to her, I was an expert.
So what did you make of it? Once you'd actually got through the rehearsal process and you got out in front of a live audience and so on, I mean, by now, the incredible buzz you get from it, and the immediate feedback from a live audience is incredible. In many ways, it's different to stand-up, isn't it? But what was your initial reaction to it, having done that first season?
I loved it, mate. Right from that first show we did. I really enjoyed the rehearsal process. It was pretty grueling, as we all know when we do panto. It's a lot of rehearsal crammed into a very short amount of time. Plus, I was learning things. I learned a lot from the director, Ian Talbot, because I had a tendency in my stand-up to do angry rants over ridiculous things. You know, like getting really angry about the quality of custard. Stupid stuff that, you know, there's no need to get that worked up over. And I started trying to bring some of that into the panto. But what Ian quite rightly pointed out was kids are just going to take that as anger. And I didn't realise that. So initially I was like, whatever. I've been a comedian for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. And I really didn't. And him just giving me that little nugget of knowledge of going, kids take things at face value. So if you're doing this rant, adults understand it, but kids will be going, oh my God, he's really angry. Instead of getting the irony of being angry over something really ridiculous. And so he was like, take it another way. And the way I took it was to flip it and just celebrate. Celebrate. Mm-hmm. And that's the big lesson and thing I bring into panto. Leave any jokes that are negative, they're on the cutting room floor. Just don't do them. Right?
Yeah, I think as well, you know, that comedy has to be placed at the right level, doesn't it? And there are gags that you can actually have with the adults that the kids aren't aware of necessarily, but they still need to be included. So that's a pretty steep learning curve. Now, you've had, I mentioned the success you've had on television, you know, with your stand-up, Chortle Award winner and all that sort of stuff, films as well along the way. That really sort of exploded, didn't it? CBB stuff that you mentioned, or CBBC stuff that you mentioned as well. What made you come over to the UK? I think it was 2003, wasn't it? What made you come here?
It was actually 2000. I came over, moved over here when I was 20. Mm-hmm. I'd been doing stand-up. So improv was sort of the discovery, I guess. And then I realised I want to be an actor. That was my whole thing. I did a 2-year sort of foundation course after school, once I finished school, towards the New Zealand Drama School. And that was the goal, mate, was I'll do 2 years at this place called Hagley Theatre Company, and then I will do 4 years at the New Zealand School of Drama, and then I'll go into a soap opera like Shortland Street, and then I'll get discovered and I'll be in Hollywood movies. That was the path. And then, of course, reality kicks in. And I was doing improv all the way through school, secondary school. And then when I went to Hagley Theatre Company, one of the third-year students, she was specialising in putting on events. And she had to put on these events, and she decided to put an improv show in this bar cafe in Christchurch. So she got me and a couple of other people to do it. She realised she didn't have enough things on the schedule, so said to me, "You're pretty funny, you should do stand-up." And I didn't really know what she was on about. Like, I knew of the concept of stand-up, but I didn't really see it as something that I could do. But she said, "I think you could." So I did it, and I did a Robin Williams routine about police figuring out when someone's stoned.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a very funny routine when Robin Williams does it. And I was 18 years old, and I did it word perfect, action perfect. Like I watched it. I wrote out what he was saying. I learnt it verbatim, you know, all of it. And of course it went really well because it's a really good routine. But at that point I didn't have a driver's license. I'd never encountered a police officer, and I had never smoked marijuana. So afterwards, even though people were telling me it was really good, I kind of thought, and that was just acting though. I think there's more to stand-up than what I just did there. And so she put on another show and got me to do stand-up again. And I said, I think I have to write my own jokes. That's when stand-up started for me. And then I started getting paid work. And then when I got accepted into the New Zealand Drama School, I thought, why do I want to do that? Why do I want to do four more years in school when I'm doing stand-up, which is feeding everything that I love? It's performing, it's writing. I was putting on my own shows, you know, so it ticked all the boxes for me. Plus, I was making money from it because how old was I? 19, and really dramatic. Sitting with friends when we all opened our letters to see if we got accepted. And thankfully in our group, everyone got accepted. But I set mine on fire with a lighter. And everyone was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And everybody else was in that headspace. So they thought it was really cool, apart from my best mate. He was the only one who called me out on it. So yeah, from then on it was stand-up. But then I realised if I really wanted to make it to stand-up, I needed to be in the UK. I knew I could get a British passport. So I did a small business course in New Zealand. Because in the 90s, mate, check this out. The government at the time, Labour government at the time, had a thing called the artist's benefit. Mm-hmm. If you could prove that you were working towards getting work in a creative industry and you needed assistance, you could get $80 a week. Plus, they would make resources available. Like, this sounds ridiculous, but you could go in there and use their computers, stuff like that. So I was getting the artist benefit, and through that, I had spoken to my caseworker and said, I want to set up a chain of comedy nights around the South Island of New Zealand. So they said, we'll put you on a small business course. Next thing, I'm doing a small business course. We get a motivational speaker in who gives us pieces of paper, and she was like, all right, I want you to immediately write down what your dream is. Don't write down what you think other people want you to do. Write down right now what it is you want to do. And I wrote down, go to London to be a stand-up. That afternoon, I went into a travel agent and bought my one-way ticket to London, and then went home and told my parents I was moving out. And they were like, oh, where are you going? Around the corner? I was like, no, other side of the world. And 3 months later, I was in London.
Absolutely incredible. And over the years, you've worked with and supported some of the biggest names in comedy, you know, the new names that people know, people like Alan Davies and Ross Noble, but also people who've been around for a long time, the likes of Joe Pasquale, who we featured on an episode recently, Jimmy Cricket, Bobby Daverin, my old mate, Duncan Norvell. Did you pick up tips and learn from the experience of working with people like that?
Of course. You know, even to this day, I'm picking up influence and I think Eddie Izzard said it years ago when he was starting out, that he wanted to be like Madonna, constantly reinventing himself to keep themselves relevant. And I think in comedy, you absolutely have to do that, because really good comedy is a reflection of what's happening in society. That doesn't mean you have to be doing political comedy or satire. It means you have to be in touch with what the shared experience is, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always being influenced and allowing myself to be influenced and allowing myself to know that I don't know everything. That even though I'm 25 years into being a stand-up comedian, there's still new things to learn. Panto's been a big thing, big learning curve for me, and I initially said no to that panto way back in 2012 because I didn't really understand what was going on and what it was. But I chatted to Tim Vine, and he was like, are you mad? Why are you turning it down? You've got to do it. And also, of course, he's a mad Elvis fan, so the fact that Priscilla was doing it, he was like, you're doubly stupid for even saying no to this. And thankfully, my agent at the time, when I said no, she said, I'm going to let you think about it for 48 hours. And every comedian that I respected and spoke to said, you've got to do it. Don't be an idiot. So again, that was another, if I hadn't been open-minded about it, if I'd listened to my initial, no, I don't want to do it, I wouldn't be here chatting to you right now. I wouldn't have discovered how much I bloody love panto. And I love the people involved. There's such a camaraderie, and you know when you're working with good panto people when they know it's ridiculous and they know it's bonkers, but we all also know just how vital it is, obviously, to a lot of theatres, to their existence, but also, as you said at the top of this podcast, how it can influence kids.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure you've been asked this a million times before, but obviously you're perfect for panto as a performer because of that sort of background in stand-up and improv and so on. Ideal. But also, is Christmas your real name? because
Yes,
it's
mate.
absolutely perfect for panto.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like it was meant to be, right? I took enough hassles at secondary school to confirm Christmas is my surname. And now, of course, Sydney Christmas is around as well.
Yeah.
So, you could have a double Christmas panto. Um, extra Christmassy. I am aware of it, and I kind of love it. Yeah, I'm just really grateful to the panto community and all the people I've worked with because, stand-up can be really cynical. You're out there by yourself. A lot of the time, the jokes you're making are undercutting, taking the opposite view of what's happening and pushing against things. But panto, it's everyone pushing together for the same goal. So when I did Peter Pan at New Wimbledon Theatre with Marcus Brigstock and Vern Troyer, I had a big argument with the head of costume. I was playing Smee, and I didn't want to pull my socks up.
You are such a rebel, aren't you?
Such a rebel. But I know sounds really lame, but in my head I was going, I don't like the socks up. Like it looks too. I was going, it looks naff. It looks lame. That's what I was thinking. And the head of costume absolutely, and fair enough, lost their shit at me when I had my socks down on the bloody dress rehearsal where all the photos were taken. So all the publicity shots that they used and stuff, I had my socks down. And it looked so bad. And so, I know this is just a story of me pulling my socks up. But in a way, that was I still had cynicism about it, if you know what I mean. That I was carrying over from the stand-up. And then, that Peter Pan started off as quite a bad panto that we all pulled together and made it a fantastic panto. And that was when I started realizing, we've all got the same goal. We've all got the same motivation. And if we're all coming at it with positive intent, we're going to get a good show out of this.
Yeah, you have
pull your goddamn socks up.
Yeah, pull your socks up. The other thing is, and performers learn this very quickly, whether they're new to panto, having done telly for years, or whether they're straight out of drama school. You have to totally commit. There's no underplaying. You said overacting, but it's commitment in every sense of the word, isn't it? I wonder if you have a favourite panto, a favourite title.
I would say I don't think it's the best, and obviously nowadays it's got, there's complications to it, but purely because it was the first one I ever did was Snow White. I've got a lot of love for that because it did. Do you know what I mean? It did put me on the track of panto. I think Cinderella's excellent, especially as the comic, because it gives you something that's very rare for a comic, which it gives you a story arc and an emotional arc. I don't know any other pantos that have that. The great scene where Cinderella stabs Buttons through the heart. It's just really fun to play. And actually, quick side anecdote, if you're up for it, Martin.
Go for it.
Are you up for it? Little side anecdote. When I was doing Bristol Hippodrome, Cinderella with Torval and Dean, who, oh my God, those two, incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Like their work ethic is insane. Anyway, I had, how you just occasionally, you get a line that just doesn't work. No matter what you do with it, It just doesn't bloody work. But you're committed and you're still doing it. So in the scene when one of the stepsisters is trying to fit on the crystal slipper, and the classic line of I shall now attempt to fit my foot in the crystal slipper. The rest of the cast go, your foot wouldn't fit in the Crystal Palace. And then me as the comic, Bristol Hippodrome, I said Arthur Askey, Bristol Hippodrome, 1952. It would never get anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as amazing as Arthur Askey was, and influential and all of that, I don't think his name resonates as much as other names. So I'm delivering this line. The cast all know it's going to get nothing, so they just push on. Partway through that run, I watched the BBC program An Audience with Bob Monkhouse. And he's got comedians in the audience, and they all ask him questions. Mike Yarwood's on it. It's a great program. one of the questions he gets asked is, did any other comedians have a technique in their comedy that you really admired? And he said, yeah, Arthur Askey had this technique that if he felt the crowd were unresponsive and needed to be warmed up more, he would, straight after the punchline, clap his hand near the microphone. And that would generate a small round of applause in the audience. It's just like a Pavlovian thing.
Yeah.
And after 3 or 4 times of doing that, the audience started getting into this learned pattern of responding more. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try Arthur Askey's technique on my Arthur Askey reference and see what happens. And so the show that evening, you know, all the lines happen, and then I go, change the line around so Arthur Askey would be the last thing I say. So I said, Bristol Hippodrome, 1952, Arthur Askey. And then I did the clap. And it got a smattering of applause.
Mm-hmm.
Enough of a reaction that it threw the rest of the cast out, because they used to just pushing on and suddenly there's a response in the room. And from then on, man, every time I delivered that line and I did that clap, it never got a massive round of applause, but it was getting a reaction, and that gave me a buzz, using an Arthur Askey technique on an Arthur Askey reference.
It's a classic signposting of a gag, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I mean, signposting is massive in panto in terms of the character play-ons and stuff like that. So, you know, when a baddie's coming on, the music is the signpost to let you know it's a baddie and all that sort of stuff. And there are others, you know, somebody might tell a gag, deliver the punchline, and then go, well, hey, or whatever.
Yeah,
it's signposting the gag. Or you might, if you've got a live drummer, for instance, you get the or whatever. You're signposting all the time, aren't you? What is it you love about panto now? I mean, if you could sort of sum up what you love about the genre and about performing in it, what would it be?
It would be the positive outcome of it. I've said it a few times. Everyone's striving for the same goal, and that is to give people a goddamn good show. And that comes from the comedy, that comes from, you know, whoever's singing those songs absolutely smashing the hell out of it. The dance routines, all of it. I love when you're working with performers who can think on their feet. We just did Snow White with Davina De Campo and Your Legend of a Son. And of course Sam Bailey. All can think on their feet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so much fun when something goes slightly wrong and you can capitalize on that. I think it's the only theatre medium, of course apart from improv and stand-up, but I'm talking like theatre, where if you fluff a line, it can actually turn into one of the highlights of the goddamn show.
Yeah.
Can't it?
Yeah, because, and the other thing is it makes that performance unique. I mean, every panto performance is unique, but that audience know that's something that they saw that the audience tomorrow or the following day won't see. It was unique for them.
Yeah. So all of those elements I love. I love working as a team, because as a stand-up, it's such a solitary business. I love working as a team. I love the rehearsal process. But my God, when you're putting that show on, when you're performing and everything is clicking, there's not many other things like it, man.
Finally, what about staying at a venue for a few years? Because that changes the dynamic, doesn't it? You build up a rapport with the audience over 3 or 4 years. They come back to see you. They know what to expect from you. And Leicester's your pantomime home now.
It is, yeah, it is. And weirdly, I've always had a bizarre connection with I don't know, it's bizarre, but I've been going to Leicester my entire career. And it seems kind of fitting that I've landed almost sort of residency there for the last few years. I don't take it lightly. Each year I feel the pressure of I have to give them something new. I'm not going to rest on any laurels here. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to rest on familiarity. I need to keep pushing and trying to make the jokes as funny as they can be, trying to innovate, and especially when I get to work with someone like Jack, mm-hmm. who, well, you know, your opinion's probably biased, but I think he's exceptional. And to create stuff with them, to create moments with someone like that, I think is a very rare treat, and it's great to have. I've got to keep pushing, got to keep trying to innovate within the boundaries of what we're given, because I know there are classic panto jokes, and there's definitely a place for them, but alongside them is room for jokes that people have never heard before.
Well, the perfect thing about your comedy is that everything you say and do, people can relate to. I mean, you summed that up early on when you talked about, ranting about custard, for instance. Who doesn't love custard? Who's not got an opinion on custard? Who's had good or bad custard? That's the sort of way that your comedy works. So, obviously, back at the Montfort Hall in Leicester this Christmas, hopefully you'll be pulling your socks up again.
Oh, mate, I've pulled my socks up every single year. I showed the photo to our head of costume, Harriet, this year, and she could not stop laughing. And she was like, I would have physically fought you to pull your socks up.
Well, listen,
I guess it's a great metaphor for life, isn't it?
It absolutely
pull
is.
Your socks up, mate.
It absolutely is. Listen, we can't wait to see you back in Leicester. There's so much of your career and stuff that we haven't been able to talk about. So, I mean, if you're up for it, let's do it again. Let's get you back for another episode in the future. But that's it for now. Jared, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for having me, Martin.
And thanks to you once again for listening. That's it for now, though. Don't forget to subscribe through your favourite podcast app and spread the word to anybody you know who loves pantomime. Next time, I'm going to be chatting to the director of Cinderella, a brand new British South Asian pantomime, which Imagine is co-producing and which embarks on a UK tour this autumn. So make sure you join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 111.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.